Okay.
Hi, everyone. This is Angela and Mandy, and we are back for this episode of Homesteaducation. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are going to talk about something, quite frankly, that never crossed my mind until Mandy sent me a text and asked me one day, do you use peat moss? Just stay with us here. The reason that this is so interesting is it turns out peat moss is incredibly controversial. There are two very polarized camps for and against peat moss. We're going to talk about the controversy and what we've learned. How you doing, Mandy?
I'm so good. So good. How are you?
I'm good. So why don't you start us off?
Okay. So we were talking before we recorded, like we always do. We need to just literally just say hi and hit record prior to actually hitting record. So Angela was like, how did you even, what even prompted you to send me that text? Which is just obviously so random, unless, I mean, it's just random. And I was starting seeds and looking, and I was in our greenhouse and I was looking at a bag of peat moss and I was like, huh. And then I remembered last year, I so lovingly got so many folks on social media saying, like, you know, how social media does, yes, sometimes, but peat moss is terrible. Don't use peat moss. It's not sustainable. Use, how do you say it?
Coconut core.
Coconut core. I always
Yeah.
want to say coconut cure, like it's like fancy or something like that. Um, Use that instead. And so I kind of left that in the dust. Peat moss is always, it's so commercially sold. It is literally almost in every single, if you go get potting soil, it is an incredible water retention aid. So, I mean, you learn about all these things when you are actually growing or, in our master gardener classes and things like that, but you don't see, I'm going to say the dark side, unless you kind of do your own research. So then I was like, huh, we ended up not using it so much this year, really at all. Nothing against it, really. I say that, but I might have a different viewpoint at some points of this conversation. So then it just prompted me to text Angela, to text you and say, do you
Mhm.
use it? And you were like, yeah, uh,
Well, at first I said no, I use an eco-friendly mix, which was
correct.
really surprising, right?
Yes, yes,
And
yes.
and then I thought, wait a second though, have I ever looked at what's
In
in
it.
the eco-friendly mix? And so I was like, hang on a second, I'm gonna go double check. And so I went and looked at the back of the bag, and sure enough, there it was. And then for me, it was just sort of like, wait a second, obviously being like the eco-friendly enthusiast that I
Eco-friendly.
am.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of thought like, well, wait a second, I'm using an eco-friendly product. Is this just greenwashed or what's the deal? Is
Mhm.
there really something going on with peat moss?
Right.
And then Mandy and I both started researching and went down this really interesting rabbit hole, which
Mhm.
is bringing us to this conversation.
Yeah. I mean, we're not going to talk your ear off about peat moss, but I think we definitely have a few points you want to cover. So, and really just, I don't know. I, yeah. So like Angela said, we kind of started to do some research, and not that we really hadn't looked at it so much before, but to Angela's point, you, again, we could fork off in so many different roads here, but you're using something, let's just use this as an example. You're using something that my guess is not the cheapest option for seed
Right.
starting potting soil, right? It's labeled or marketed eco-friendly or whatever it is. Organic, probably it might say, you might see some verbiage of something like that on the bags. And it probably actually is higher quality than, some Miracle Grow. That's the first thing that came to my mind. Not that that's something that, you do you, but you think that that it's great, it's good, it's fine for the environment, it's good seed starting material, whatever it is. And then you read it and you're like, okay, it has peat moss. had I not sent you the text, I guarantee you would have never probably even thought anything of it, or like maybe even looked at the ingredients that closely, which is fine and totally normal. Like I probably wouldn't either. Most of you all listening probably have never looked at it. I think we should probably start or lead this conversation or fired up topic. Maybe if you use it, it's fine. I'm not telling you not to use it. I think it's just more understanding the controversy behind it. You know, when Angela and I were talking, I was really, so many people were telling me how bad it was for the environment. And I'm like, gosh, I'm thinking to myself, but I've been using it for years and it's literally in everything. And how could it be so bad? And it works so well. And people use it all over their lawns when they're growing, you know, if you put like seed down or whatever it is, like folks that are trying to grow grass, um, that's what you use. It's in a lot of like turf, what's it called? Sod.
Yeah.
Um, it's anyway. So I think, and I'm still like slightly, not necessarily confused, but it is kind of confusing when you think about peat moss and then sphagnum moss, right?
It's interesting because I think this is going to be an even better conversation. Because after what we've read, you still feel somewhat undecided. After what I've read, I feel like, okay, I'm going to try my best not to use
Not to use
this.
it. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to think of, and again, we're going to get to why this is controversial in a second, but I was trying to think of like, what is an equivalent, like in the gardening world of this when it comes to like, quote unquote, how bad it is. And I
Okay.
thought the only thing I can come up with is like when somebody says using neem oil as a pest repellent is organic.
Oh.
Okay, yep, you can get organic neem, right? It's an all natural product, but it can negatively, or it does negatively impact
Mhm.
the soil ecosystem.
Okay.
And so that's not something you're necessarily going to know unless you care to do the research. It just dawns on you unless you come across it when you randomly researching or on an Instagram post or whatever. It's just something like you don't know what you don't know.
And that's because of marketing.
Yeah, it is. And I think when doing this research, I mean, I'm just going to say it like it is. The information that I found that was against harvesting peat moss was like the one I printed and highlighted the crap out of was from Oregon State University,
Hmm.
right? I skip over all just like the personal blogs because I'm looking more for like accredited information. So I have like extension papers and whatnot. Then the people or the resources that are saying, yes, you should use it, it is renewable, they're all on companies' landing pages.
Right.
So I did not find
Any
um,
any actual research that's yeah.
that says that it's okay. So let's talk about why that is.
Okay. I mean, it when you look at it, if you look at something that's accredited, right? Everybody's hang up is that, I mean, really when I first started looking at it, essentially it's not peat is harvested and packaged and everything like that. So mainly in Russia and where? Canada, I think, is
Canada, like
a lot
there's
of
some,
times harvested.
yeah, there's some in like the Northwest US, but mostly it's going to be like Canada and Russia.
Okay. So I don't know, you have to like think of like all of these like bogs. It's almost like a well, what I think of is like a New Orleans type vibe. Like it's very like mossy and like humid and whatever, and it's like a bog area. So
It's like a
everybody's
wetland.
the wetland, yeah. When essentially peat is harvested, and most accredited data is saying that it takes like thousands of years for it to actually form. I read like 1,000 years for it to be it's in like an ecosystem as a whole. And when we harvest it, there's no way. And I don't know where I read it. I didn't put it in the notes this time, but it was when we first started talking about it like a month ago. Um, the like harvest rate to actual growth rate was astronomical, meaning that we're harvesting way too much and it can't renew itself. So I don't know what else we can compare it to. But, and we can go back to all of this. I don't want to stop. I don't want to skip over all, I don't want to skip over the data of like how it's harvested and all of that stuff. But also, I think a lot of the controversy, if you will, is around carbon.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I would say probably maybe even more, especially with, I'm going to say it, global warming, because this is in all of the data that you look up when you talk about, or you look up anything about peat moss and how it's harvested. And, essentially the bogs, the wetlands of where the peat grows. Not only is it that's living, right? It's an organism all in of itself, but it's a home to so many other things. Some data that I read was saying that when they're also, I think that people call them like carbon houses or carbon sinks. So
Sinks, yeah.
when it's harvested, carbon is released in the atmosphere. I mean, it can get kind of complex when people talk about carbon and global warming and things like that. But if you only take away one thing about carbon and the way that it impacts the environment, is carbon regulates the Earth's temperature.
Mm-hmm.
That's just, and then that's factual. It also provides us energy and all, other things that we do now in modern day society. But carbon compounds regulate the Earth's core temperature. It regulates the temperature. It happens a lot in the ocean and things like that. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But what an alarming thing that I read was that when peat is harvested, carbon is released in the atmosphere, and it can take up to 40 years. I think I read 40 to 50 potentially. 40 to 50 years for carbon to stop being emitted from that process.
Yeah, so if it was harvested today, and even if it was quote unquote replenished or replanted, it's not going to stop leaching carbon for 40 years, because on average, these bogs have absorbed carbon from the atmosphere for 10,000 to 12,000 years. And that's from a soil scientist.
It's nuts. It's nuts. And again, just taking it back to the very beginning of this conversation, I never knew any of this. I never even, I don't even know. I mean, and well, it's like, what else don't I know? But probably a lot. I mean, probably a lot. But I don't know. So.
All right. So here, let's do some data. Are you good?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Mandy's getting fired up. You can't see her. I'll put this on YouTube so you can see her, but she gets fired up, which is good. We like it. So it's releasing all of this carbon, right? And so what's really interesting, and it's just hard to get your head around, is that these bogs represent 5% of the Earth's surface, but contain more carbon than all of the planet's forests combined.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this is a quote from Oregon State University's Department of Horticulture, the scientist there. And the argument against using peat moss is that, okay, you go through these bogs, you have some articles say, oh, well, you only dig down like a couple of millimeters. And then other ones say, no, you're actually digging down into the bog several feet. And this is after you drain it.
Right.
So when you've drained it, you've now removed any aquatic life or birds that live there. But now we're digging, right? Or we're scraping and removing layers of quote unquote soil. It's not it's this peat. But we've had several different forms of disruption now, by leaking the bog, eradicating the wildlife and the native species that live there, and now by disturbing the actual floor of the bog. So then people take it, they dry it out. The sphagnum moss, the part that grows on the topmost layer of the bog, is going to be more green. And that's the stuff like you see like in like a floral arrangement. Like if you were to go to get a floral arrangement or fake plants and then it has that green moss stuff, that's what that is. It just dried out, super green. Probably still add dye to it, but you get my point. But then the stuff that we use in horticultural practices is going to be the stuff from the lower levels of the bog that's more quote unquote soil based or soil looking. And that's what helps with drainage. And it also helps retain just the right amount of moisture. So what's really interesting about this is Canadian peat, which is mainly what we're talking about, is different than the peat in the UK. The peat in the UK, like Mandy said, is going to be banned in 2024. Peat there has been succumbed to incredibly bad harvesting practices for a very long time because peat was also a main fuel source, which again contributes to greenhouse gas pollution. So now it's going to be banned, not just because it's quote unquote peat, it's because these bogs have been over harvested, poorly harvested, and they want it gone. Canada, on the other hand, says, okay, we are under government regulation. Every time we harvest or drain a bog and take this peat, Canada regulates it and says we have to plant more in excess back of what we harvest, and therefore it's sustainable. I popped up.
I beg to differ.
Canada. I agree. I popped up. I found this on Manitoba because I was looking, all right, what is the actual policy that Canada has in place? I found something on Manitoba's government website. It's called the Peatlands Stewardship Act and Regulations. Stewardship, excuse me. It's very short. I'll read it quickly. It was proclaimed in June 2015 as Canada's first standalone peatlands legislation to ensure a balanced approach between peatland conservation and responsible development, which I take to mean harvesting. The new act now requires peat harvest license holders to submit comprehensive peatland management and recovery plans. The guidelines for these plans are currently under development. And they'll be available for public comment through this website once complete.
And when was that? 2015?
Yeah.
Okay. So never. Fine and well. Not really, but like, okay. But all data supports that in my lifetime, if we tried to replant a bog, it wouldn't even get close to appropriate. If we harvested today, okay, pretend I'm a baby. If we harvest, whatever, if we harvested a bog today in 80 years, it's never going to be, it will never be where it was 80 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago. In our lifetime, the regeneration or the replenishment of these bogs, it's impossible. That's all there is to it. It's not, it's just, it takes so long, hundreds of years for them to become established. And when we go in and they're obviously harvesting from established bogs, it's essentially wiped out for hundreds of years. That's a really like blanket statement. I completely understand that, but it's not going to be the way it was in a short period of time. It would be like going in and leveling a forest. And sure, are new trees going to grow? Yes, but how long is it going to take for those trees to get to where they were when you cut them down? Hundreds of years.
Yeah. I guess for me, when I think of what a renewable resource is, I think of like wind. There's an unlimited supply. It's something that's created by nature, not something you have to manually reestablish.
Replenish.
Right.
And again, this is not meant to be like any type of like a conviction episode or whatever it is. I think that, well, obviously we were both in the same boat a little bit ago because we just didn't know. You just don't know what you don't know. I mean, that goes like with everything in life, right? But I think it's important to note that there are other options. You don't have to use it.
Well, unfortunately, it sounds like if you buy anything bagged that is labeled, it's going to have it in there. And so then you think of...
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
No, go.
So then you think of, all right, if I can't buy a product, like,
yeah,
what am I supposed to be using? So I thought, okay, well, first of all, I'm going to use up what I have because I'm not just going to have all this be harvested for nothing to go in the garbage. So I might as well use what I have, which was like a bag left. And then after I used up this little seed starting mix bag, then I switched over to, all right, potting mix. And you always hear, can't use potting mix to start seeds. You have to use seed starting mix. It's looser. It helps with root growth. But then I thought, wait a second though, but we direct sow a lot of seeds and they do just fine. So why would I not be able to use a potting mix? I get that it has drainage components.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, I researched this. It has wood chips in there. You're going to have big chunks of things. So does in-ground soil. But then if I actually started looking at the fundamentals of it, one of the things that people like about starting seeds in compost is that there are big chunks of debris in there. And what ends up happening is a root from the seedling hits that debris and it feathers off and it creates a new fibrous root system that goes around it. You're actually facilitating a more web-like
Stronger
root
root growth.
structure
Yeah.
for that plant. And so, and again, this is the same as if I went and just direct sowed spinach in the garden, or I don't want to say a carrot because that's just a taproot, but I think for me personally, I feel like I haven't questioned these things enough.
100%. 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
I would be the first one to say, like, when everybody, when I was, I mean, again, this whole conversation started because I was remembering the people that were so mad at me for using peat moss when I shared that this is what we use to start, in a mix that we make ourselves when we start our seeds. It's worked so well, never questioned it, literally is everywhere at any big commercial store, all the way down to greenhouses or like local nurseries. Okay. So you just don't question it. And so I just kind of brushed it aside. And then you really start reading and you're like, what the heck? And again, it's just, if you know better, you do better. That's all there is to it. It's not a, oh, you use it and you're terrible or you're ruining the environment or whatever it is. It's not necessarily, I mean, you know better, you do better. I don't know. Yeah.
You can use up what you have guilt free. You can keep buying it if this is something that you feel you're not passionate about. You can use potting mix. Things that are considered more sustainable are you can start your seeds in compost. You can start them in a mix of compost, leaf mulch. Perlite is still considered sustainable for many folks. It's like lava glass or something like that, help to support drainage. Coconut core, or as Mandy likes to say, coconut chorus.
Pinky up.
Mandy likes the coconut, but there's arguments that that's not sustainable because even though it's sustainably harvested, it has to go through all the packaging and transportation to get from warm climates to cool growing climates. I think just like anything else in homesteading or gardening, it comes back to what do you resonate with and what feels right to you. And if you want to keep buying seed starting mix, great, go for it.
Yeah.
I think for me personally, I'm gonna use up my potting mix and then I will probably just
not
do compost.
Yeah,
I'll do compost because I have plenty of it.
Same.
And it's free. It's free.
Right. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's not free because you have to scoop the poop. I'm just kidding. I mean, you should be labor costs.
Labor costs.
I know. I don't know if you want to, I don't know if we want to just leave it at that and have people, definitely reach out if you have questions or if you want. I mean, we could go. I feel like I have read so much about peat moss. I'm like literally sitting in bed and Casey's like, what are you doing? I'm like reading about peat moss. It's like 9 o'clock at night. Like that's not normal. And also I feel it's very normal to me. So I guess the take homes, why peat moss might not be the best option. is environment, climate change, the release of carbon. And then really it's just, even if you don't want to talk about climate change, even if you don't want to talk about the carbon released into the atmosphere, which obviously go hand in hand. But I read something that said something along the lines of when we harvest these bogs, that it releases more carbon in the atmosphere than the airline industry does. Also, I never read anything about cows. I literally just had to say that. I've been waiting all episode to say that cows are like, it's like not even like an issue to when we were talking about carbon and the greenhouse effect and all that. So
Yeah.
anyway, so the impact to the environment, really that there are other options. I think that some
Yeah.
people, you get in a pickle when it's like, well, gosh, this is my only option. It's not our only option. I am in the same boat as you. We did not use it this year. And I don't think that we will going forward. Um, there's just no reason to.
Hmm.
I don't know. Um,
Well,
yeah.
the trolls served a purpose. They taught us something, though they did not deliver their
Huh.
message in a productive way or a nice way. It did spawn some food for thought.
Mark this day down in history. Let me tell
Yeah,
you.
right. All
I
right.
don't
You
know.
have anything else you want to add? We'll
No, I
put the
don't think
links to our
so.
articles.
Yes.
We'll put these in show notes as
Yes.
always. And we always get questions. What are show notes? When
Oh,
you pop up an episode on a podcast player, let's just say iTunes or Apple Podcasts, you pop up the show, you can see when it's playing a little beginning of a summary or a description. You click that and hit more, and you will then see an entire description. And we call that, most podcasters call that the show notes. Okay. So you're going to see some information that we've talked about in here. We will put links to the articles we've talked about. I will put this on YouTube. I know that YouTube offers the ability for those descriptions to have clickable links. So if you, I don't know if podcast players allow you to click the links, but we've been pasting them there. Anyway, if you want to click them and not have to retype everything in, we'll put this on YouTube soon. I think that's all we got today.
I would be interested to know if there was any, I want to know what people think. So obviously, I don't know. Our social links are always in the show notes as well. Um, maybe we're
Why don't we
behind
make,
the times in talking about this. I don't know. I
I
don't
don't
think
think so.
so. I don't think so because I just don't. But I'm glad we're talking about it. I'm glad we because I think it's important.
Why don't we do a post on our Homestead Education Instagram account that will
Yeah.
also link to our own accounts, and then people can chime in there if they want to say
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. We greatly appreciate you and we hope you have the best day.
Bye.